Welcome to the Warrior Way podcast, where we talk about all things Liberty Christian School. I'm your co-host for today, Jared Mlynczyk, Assistant Head of School, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's show. Today is a very special episode as we're talking Warrior Community with our president, Dr. Blair McCullough. So with that, let's dive into today's conversation. Dr. McCullough, thanks for being on the show today. How are you doing?
Doing great. I appreciate the invite. And by the way, this podcast has been awesome. You guys have done a great job.
Well, this is going to be not only a special edition because the president of Liberty is here today, but also because we get to co-host this. This will be a lot of fun.
That's right.
We'd go a little back and forth. And I think what's on the topic today is to break down some survey information. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had hundreds of responses that came in from our parents from end of October, early November survey. And we thought it'd be a fun opportunity to get on the podcast and kind of work some of those issues out.
Yep, feedback always so important to what we do.
So the topics, so the parents that are keeping the timers at home, we're going to go through 5 or 6 major topics that came up in the survey. And just quickly here, 1, we're going to talk about parent partnerships with Liberty. 2, we're going to address scheduling and traffic. 3, we're going to talk about our admissions policy and the kind of families we work with at Liberty. We're going to also talk a little bit about academics, communication, and a little bit of the role of our board. And that's a lot of content to cover, so we'll do the best we can in that regard.
One giant speed round. Here we go.
I think we'll just do lightning round for the whole whole podcast. So let's start at the top with parent partnerships, and this came up in the survey in a couple different shapes and forms. And tell us, Dr. McCullough, how do parents get involved? What do partnerships look like here at Liberty?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, when you consider the fact that we spend more time with our family's children than they do, 8 hours a day or longer, depending on what they're involved in, it's extremely important that we're directly connected to the family unit and what's going on there and how we can support them. And data has always shown that when there's a strong connection between the school and the family, that it does nothing but increase the likelihood of student success, academically, co-curricular wise. But for us, even more importantly, with our mission to provide a holistic Christian education, that partnership is huge.
Absolutely. And I know we've had in the last couple of years, if we come out of the COVID era, if we can still use that word on air, and we've had new families have joined us from all over the country and here locally in DFW. What are some maybe suggestions you might have for especially those that are new to the school? They're on fire for Christian education, but how do they get plugged in terms of their partnership?
There's obviously a lot of opportunities at a school like ours, the size of ours. Some of the more basic ones is just by supporting our students and student athletes through athletics, fine arts, academic events, any of the events that we have coming out and supporting those. But also we offer some volunteer opportunities through our PTF. We have a position that we've added that's going to be a community coordinator position. And so there'll be a lot more information coming out about that. But I would recommend that anybody who has a desire to volunteer here at the school to reach out to your school, your principal, and just inquire about those things. And again, we'll have some more things rolling out after Christmas that are more specific.
And from your experience of being at all of the various events and your role as a president of the school, give a couple of events if you're a new Liberty parent and you say, if you want to know some of the culture of the school, go to this. What are some of the top of your list?
I think the beginning of the year events are always important. Whether it's orientations as you kick it off, and that's a great way to start the year. But then again, throughout the year, everything we do is we want to be student centric, right? And so supporting our students and, Friday nights are always a blast here at Liberty. Basketball games, all those things. But we have an incredible fine arts department. The shows are amazing. Those are always great community builders. I would even encourage families when there's opportunity to come to chapel. I know that in the primary school that happens quite a bit, but there's also opportunities in our secondary school, middle and upper, occasionally for that. Pep rallies, all those things are great ways to connect with the community.
So another one of the topics that came up on the survey, would probably no surprise when we talked about some of the new families that joined the school, just about traffic flow out front and about our daily schedule, our bell schedule, and these kinds of things. So we've already made some adjustments this year on all of those fronts to try to improve in this area. But what's an update we should come to expect around, let's just start with the daily and the bell schedule. What's that look like for families going forward?
Yeah, we first and foremost, we had some goals this year to try to adjust and make some changes to support safety of our campus, wellness of our students, making sure that there was a variety of opportunities for tutoring and getting into our sports performance. All of those were areas that we had identified as issues. And so we created this new schedule primarily for upper school. And what the result of that was we accomplished a lot of those goals. And unfortunately, there were some unintended outcomes, traffic being probably part of that, and some as well as some other things. And so we've definitely made some adjustments that I think have improved, but we recognize and we're still hearing and listening to the fact that we need to make some more adjustments. So we're going to be doing that at Christmas break. We'll have a new schedule coming out for middle school and upper school. Both of those groups should be hearing from their principals about what that looks like in the next week or so. And, part of that will be making sure that it has an impact, not just inside the building, but outside the building with our traffic patterns. And so hopefully that's going to be the case. But we're always looking and tweaking and want to improve things. So we appreciate the input on that.
Absolutely. And I know feedback came in on the survey too. Some are thankful that we assign some additional personnel to help with traffic in the afternoon, which has made a big difference. And what I hear you saying is when those details come out in the bell schedule, that will also help probably with some of that morning drop-off time, because I know that's another issue our families are facing.
Sure will. We've definitely seen some improvement in the afternoon. The morning is still a challenge for us. So having Alvin and others out there has been huge. Alvin's a natural, so it's been good.
Absolutely. Third topic that came out of our themes of the survey, Dr. McCullough, was around missions, the families that are here at Liberty, the mission of our school. And I first want to start this part of the conversation around the size of the school, the enrollment. Everybody knows that Christian private schools have a commitment to small class sizes. That's a given. But as people feel the growth of Liberty Christian School, what kind of season are we in and where are we headed when it comes to student enrollment? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So we, like many private Christian schools across the country, have seen a significant increase in enrollment and interest in what the Christian school has to offer, which is great. It's amazing. At the same time, as you asked, what does that look like for the future? Liberty, in my opinion, we have the opportunity to continue to grow, but we're not necessarily looking at our approach from a growth mindset of numbers. And so we're getting close to a point of capping out some classrooms. And in fact, we've already capped out some grade levels, particularly in the primary school. And part of the outcome of that has been a beautiful opportunity for us to grow from primary up and have families in our community a lot longer. And but we're definitely going to continue to work to cap things off. I would anticipate you'll see a lower ratio of new families next year. And let me say that I am so excited about the families that we've had come in these last 2 years. We have some amazing new families. And so we're extremely grateful for that.
And you mentioned the phrase capping, and so people might think, does that mean a certain amount of students in a grade and whatnot? And yes, that is what capping refers to, but also what you're saying is when the waitlist movement is that it's not guaranteed that when somebody's applying, they're going to be getting into Liberty Christian School. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I also want to reiterate, you mentioned around the growth, especially in primary school, that was very strategic, I know, and being in those conversations that we have these students that come up through the ranks, start in the wee warrior age even, and they come through and they're here and they're in the culture. Speak to why that was a priority for the school for this year at the primary school level.
Well, obviously we've seen through the years that all those families that have been at Liberty for quite a while and come all the way up through understand the mission of the school and the buy-in that comes through that, and then the outcome for those students, it has a greater impact. But I think as well as from a business standpoint, it helps us with planning. It helps us know in terms of teachers that we need to hire. It helps us with budget. It helps us in every way, as does controlling all of our enrollment numbers. And so there's a lot of benefits for us.
Absolutely. Let's talk more specifically about the families that have come. You just heard so many great people have joined the community here in the recent 12 to 24 months, really. What does that process look like from admissions? It doesn't need to be so detailed. We don't have time for that now. But what kind of families are we looking for? What's expected of them in terms of Christian testimony or interest in a Christian school? What does that look like?
Sure. We, our process has evolved over the last 3 to 5 years, I would say, significantly. And through that process, I think it's important, as we look at that process, I should say, I think it's important that we make a very important distinguishing factor for us, and that's missional schools versus covenant schools. There's a lot of schools out there, Christian schools that are covenant schools, which would require one parent to sign off that they have accepted Christ and they're in a walking relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. Where a missional school doesn't require that, but does require a commitment to the school's values. And Liberty is a missional school and really has been for a long time. I actually think there's going to be a greater trend towards missional schools in our country, but that's a different podcast.
Right.
But as a missional school, when we look at the candidates at our school, we're not looking for the perfect child. There is no perfect child, but we're not looking for the perfect family. But we are looking for families and students that demonstrate the aptitude, desire, commitment to grow in all things of the Warrior Way, and that includes families that are open to church and relationship with Christ and all the things that we put forth through our biblical worldview approach. And so we have testimonials that are provided by parents and students. And so we get a pretty good picture of where they are in their faith journey. We also have some behavior documents that come from schools. We get their transcripts, all the typical things, including map testing. And so we're able to get a pretty good gauge where they are.
Absolutely.
In those areas.
And even as a missional school, and I know we got into some kind of technical terms in Christian education about covenant or discipleship schools and what you require of parents. I also know, in being a part of these conversations as a missional school, there are times where there has to be an opening or an interest in a Christian education. And there are times where a family may present themselves saying that, this is maybe not the environment you're really looking for, because we're going to preach the word here. We're going to put kids through spiritual experiences, and this is not necessarily the place. I mean, would you say that's been your experience too at times?
Absolutely. And that requires absolute honesty and on our part about who we are, and then sticking to it.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So as we're talking about the missional side of our missions process, what do the requirements look like for discipleship, church attendance? How does that play into this, knowing there's going to be some level of wiggle room where a family is in that timeline?
Well, I think as we talk about a missional school, we don't have at Liberty, we don't have a specific policy-driven expectations for our families. In other words, it's not going to be in the handbook. However, in order for our students and families to fully realize the outcomes of our mission, I think it's extremely important that our families are pursuing outside church family. Liberty is designed to support the church. We're not designed to be the church. And so that's where we strongly encourage that. And through the admissions process, we're even able to identify some families that have that interest and connect them with other families that are plugged in at local churches and can help them get plugged in as well. So that's really important. We do require every family to sign our statement of faith that they agree with it, and that includes morality, lifestyle statements. But again, being part of a healthy church community is extremely important. Definitely encourage that within our families.
And to go further on the parent side, once they're enrolled at Liberty and they go through that process you just outlined, what are the general expectations around parents as they relate to how they engage with teachers, administrations, even with one another? I mean, Christian schools, it's very obvious to say this, but we are unique in the sense we are a community. And so what are the parent expectations within that community once they're here in the Warrior land?
Sure. I think Scripture's very clear about how we're to treat each other as believers, and that applies directly to our school. But if we're now going to kind of switch sides to the more policy side of things, which is always a little bit colder, but I think overall parents need to support the mission of the school and demonstrate that they can do that, and as we all do, even as those that work here. But that means supporting policies and procedures. That means that includes ways in which we interact around disagreements, conflict. Matthew 18 is a big piece of that. Even discipline and responsibility are huge pieces of that. the way that we behave with one another has a direct impact on culture, as culture is dictated by behaviors around relationships. And so if, we're not demonstrating the right behaviors that lead to the outcomes we're looking for, there can be a negative impact on us achieving our mission. So it's really important as a culture even that we work together. And I'll just say that in our society today, I think it's becoming more and more important that we model for our children, our students, what it looks like to manage these things well. And, someone might think that, dress code is not that important. But I would say if you have a dress code, then being faithful in the little things and following on the little things will lead to faithfulness in the bigger things. And I think that's an age-old.
That's right.
Yeah.
The irony of the situation too is you mentioned about Christian education and its growth, not just here at Liberty, but around the country and even internationally. The parents that maybe are new into Christian education, this might be the first time in their entire family educational pathways that they've decided on Christian education. Sometimes it's a nice reminder. I think this through quite a bit to say we're all on the same team.
Yes.
We all came here with the same objectives. And so when we're problem solving, we have to keep that in mind. Whether parents came in going, I want my kids immersed in a place where people I know are going to be living out a biblical worldview the best they can. But at the same time, understand that we're not enemies. We're frenemies, right? Yeah. We work together. And I think it's that seeking understanding when we live out life in community that is a beautiful thing in a Christian school.
Yep, partnership. And we've heard it over the last several years through our scriptures of the year, how the Lord's been speaking to us about that community and partnership. And, on a more practical level, working your way through the chain of command is always the best approach. Whether it's if you have a question with a teacher, start with that teacher. If it's a coach, start with the coach, and then work your way up if you're still having difficulties. But always approach that. And again, this is from both sides, from staff and families. Always approach it with the attitude that you mentioned. That was very well said.
Yeah, no teacher wants to feel like somebody's going over their head, and no administrator wants to feel like, I don't know how to help you in those kinds of questions or conversations, for sure.
Okay, so Jared, you've had me on the hot seat over here for a few minutes now.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna turn it back on you a little bit. So, quite a few questions on the survey. I would say from an interest standpoint, it's always something that families want to know about direction academically, and so let's dive into that a little bit. Where is our academic program heading, would you say?
Yeah, I think if you were to put a bow on the entire academic program from preschool all the way through our seniors, is that we're trying to do the best we can to focus on the needs of our students. We have a diverse set of students in terms of their learning abilities, their backgrounds, gifted students, everything in between, and we want to make sure as a whole community that we're doing the best we can to systematize that. How do you meet the needs of individual students in a system? That's a very difficult challenge for any school. But for us, what that looks like is we are going to be focusing more and more of our energies on taking biblical worldview into the classroom and practical strategies our teachers can carry out. That's fundamental to the work we're doing within the Warrior Way. The other piece, though, is we're also moving towards training into the area of what some might call student-centered instruction. You might call it individualized instruction. But basically, it's a very simple thing to explain to someone. What is it that your child needs? What are their goals? What are your family goals? How do we come alongside to do the best we can to meet those? It looks different for what a first-grade family needs versus maybe a engaging internship and an experience a junior, senior might need. But that's the aim of our current academic program.
That's great. A lot of exciting stuff happening on that side. And so when you talk about meeting the individual needs of our students, one of the things that comes to mind is our mentoring program that you brought in when you came.
Yeah.
And we're in year 2 now. Mm-hmm. So what's going on with mentoring? How's that going, and where do you see that heading?
Yeah. The mentoring program, my prior experience before Liberty, had several years of making adjustments and rolling out a mentoring program. But I noticed quickly coming into Christian education before Liberty even that while the mission of Christian schools is to be building relationships, building leaders for Christ, sending them out in the community, and that's pretty standard everywhere, as I started looking around going, are we spending at least a little bit of time on this each week where we're really going to make sure that's going to have potential fruit come out of that? I'm not saying we don't need great classes or fine arts or sports, but we do need some time just to pause from what we're doing programmatically and have a student really get to a point where I'm reflecting on how I'm doing. So the mentoring program, if I could define it for people, it's really a way to force, if you will, a mid-week reflection process. How am I doing? What's going well? What's not going well? But what I really need as a student is I need an adult on this campus that knows me, not all the details of my life. This is not a counseling session. That's not what this is designed for. But I need someone who just knows what I'm working through. And it's a stressful week right now. I got some stuff going on. I'm going to come alongside and I'm going to pray for you. And guess what? When you make it through that week, I'm going to see you next week. I'm going to say, high five and nice job. Some attaboys and attagirls go a long way. So we focused our mentoring program on the middle school and the upper school levels the last 2 years. We made some tweaks to the schedule this year, I think, to make it a little easier for our teachers in terms of trying to meet with our students. And there's even so much more to go there. I've been very blessed to see here at Liberty this year several examples of teachers that have made this communal as well. The kids are a captive audience at the same time during mentoring. And so kids bringing in treats and sharing snacks and just sharing life together and realize, yeah, the Lord has all placed us here at this unique time. And it's a beautiful thing to see those relationships coming together.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see that program evolve. And it sounds like when you talk about it, I hear you saying that our students are going to feel like they've been seen and heard.
Absolutely right.
As an ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I would challenge even having a small class size, that's fantastic, but having someone that can see me for who I am as a child of God and going, you know what, you did a fantastic job with that. You know what, I'm going to challenge you with this. And having someone that can just spend a little bit of time to push in that area can be very, very fruitful.
Yeah, I think that's what you just hit on should be at the top of the Christian school pamphlet, right? That
you would hope so.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
As an outcome. So that's great. Earlier you were talking about all the amazing things that are coming and happening. Obviously, with anything new, there needs to be support and training. And so, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the professional development initiatives that we have going for our teachers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually launched this year an entire professional development program, and not that Liberty has never had one before. We really just retooled it. With the support of one of our accrediting bodies, the Association of Christian Schools International, and with their blessing. And what we ended up doing was packaging together, I think, a combination of school-wide strategic goals of things that we wanted to accomplish with professional development. We know we need biblical worldview training. We know we need curriculum training. We know we need to look at data and make decisions based upon that data. That's the 101 course. But as I observe around campus, our kindergarten teachers have radically different needs than our 8th grade English, math, and Bible teachers. So while the school-wide strategic goals apply to everybody, the professional development needs are very individualized. And so our professional development plan, as we roll out our school initiatives, will take into consideration those topics and give them the training that they're looking for. But also, we're trying to fan the flames of, all right, 3rd grade team, what do you need right now? Well, maybe I have a new teacher that really just needs some help thinking through classroom management structure. Great, let's get them what they need. Now, we're not going to make our 20-year vets sit through the same session because that's not what they need. But maybe our veteran needs, I need another way to do this that I've been doing for 5 to 10 years. I'm at wit's end. I need a new way forward. And so what's really encouraging about our professional development program across the board, we have a beautiful spectrum of experience of educators have been at it for 3 decades, some that have 5 years, some that this is their very first year teaching. And we have a mentoring program within that for new hires as well. And while we're still early on this, I'm excited to say that there have been several comments around, thanks for seeing what my needs are. And nobody likes a forced canned, professional development program. I didn't really need that training, but I do think so far we're starting to see some fruit come out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, flourishing teachers lead to flourishing students.
Happy 100%. Teachers, happy students.
Yep. That's great. Okay, I want to transition back to the conversation about communication for a minute. And more specifically, Jared, have you speak to how students and parents can communicate with teachers and other staff members around academic issues and support needs and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a spectrum depending upon which grade we're talking about. And as the end of the middle school years and upper school years are much more independent on this ask. Generally, the process, though, needs to start with a relationship that's bond between the family unit and the teacher. It's very, very important. At the primary school level, and that includes preschool and primary, Sometimes it's more unified because they tend to spend most of their day with one teacher, and you get to know that teacher very well. And there's conferences set up for those conversations to take place. My emphasis and advice in that area is not only to build that relationship, but you're trying to go to a level where you can start to exchange ideas, and it's not combative. It's not questioning why you would ask this to me, because you understand the parent knows the child better than anybody else does, but you also build that relationship where the teacher knows that child pretty well, especially as the year goes along. And you build up that conversation. And that looks like it starts with an email, it starts with a phone call, it starts with an in-person communication. And again, as we said earlier, we're all on the same team. We all have the same goals in mind,
That's right.
But we have a lot of differences of opinion sometimes about how we're going to get there. Start there. In the middle and upper school level, as it relates to communication, issues come up all the time. Education is messy, and there's sometimes 1,000 different opinions about how something would go. And all of those opinions might be accurate, but sometimes a certain course or a pathway is chosen, and that's not always everybody's decision. So as it relates to the individual student, we definitely advocate for our older students to seek their teacher out. I can think of several examples, but I've been proud to say that some of our kids, it's been a brave step to go, yeah, I need to go talk to my math teacher. Yes, go talk to and say, I'm just drowning right now. You know, I'm watching, but I'm not picking this up, and just encourage them to have that conversation. And not that we're leaving parents out of it, but they need to learn that advocacy as well. Where I would encourage maybe secondary level parents, middle and upper schools, come alongside when that step has taken place, and maybe they've gone one more attempt to work with their teacher, and something is still not happening. And then say, hey, could I maybe just reach out and say, can we all meet together? And I think that's where that transfer of independence goes to the student. But then you still need a little bit of support from mom and dad on occasion.
That's right.
So I'm thinking too, Dr. McCullough, in the student going to the teacher and then the parent at appropriate age getting alongside and supporting that process. But let's take this a little bit further and get more practical with this area. Let's say that happens. Student goes to a teacher, or at the lower levels, a parent and teacher trying to work it out, and it's not being resolved. It's been worked on. There's been at least one faithful attempt, maybe two faithful attempts. It's not working. What would you advise a parent to do in that situation? And I'll give you an example. Let's say it's a student who is struggling in a class, or they're feeling disengaged for whatever reason, and the parent and teacher were trying to work it out. It's not fruitful. What would you suggest they would do in that situation?
At that point, there's always opportunities to, engage a principal, assistant principal at the school, and continue that conversation and see if there's any mediation that can happen, support for that. We also, in the middle school and upper school, we have some academic advising folks that can also speak into it. But again, it's like we talked about earlier, it's just to continue working your way up. And oftentimes you may find yourself in a situation where you come into the school or call the school about something, and then someone kind of pushes you back down. And that's not meant to say that we don't have an open door policy at all. Right. It's just meant to make it go through the proper chain so that those that are closest to the situation can solve the situation. But absolutely, if you're still having a difficulty, then I would strongly encourage to visit with your principal and ask those questions and continue up as it goes.
And I could tell you, from the principal's side, there's nothing that warms their heart more knowing that the parents followed those steps. And now you're basically asking for me to come into this conversation and figure out how I can be that mediator. And let's maybe problem solve a little bit here. And if the information's been settled that the parents try to work out with the teacher, that makes the principal's work a lot more manageable.
Sure does. And I understand there's oftentimes some perceptions out there that there could be some kind of retaliation for reaching out to a teacher or principal. I mean, 23 years, and I've heard that so many times. But I don't think that that's really an ultimate reality, and certainly that's not something that we would allow. But I strongly would encourage going to those individuals directly.
So the last topic came up on our survey was around about our board, and we've talked a lot about students and parents and principals, directors, kind of that progression that works out. What does that mean to a parent in terms of a board? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. You'll often hear the term leadership is or governance is leadership, and what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
But our board specifically, their primary role is the fiduciary responsibility of the school, financial direction and sustainability, and they do a tremendous job with that. They're also responsible for the enforcement of policies and making sure that we have the right policies in place, but we're carrying and following through on those. Adherence to our mission. We're not getting mission drift or making decisions that don't match who we are. And then ultimately supervision of my position, head of school. But they're not involved in the day-to-day operations. They're not down in the weeds of what we do.
So when you say policy, for example, a board decision is not, are we going to start at 8:10 or 8:20? That's not a board policy, right?
No.
Much bigger than that.
Yeah, that's called getting into the weeds in operations. But and they have no desire to do that. And so, Well,
Dr. McCullough, this has been a lot of fun kind of debriefing the survey results today. And I'll leave with a final thought and give you the legitimate final word. When I look at surveys from our parents and our faculty, and then even our students, some of our parents don't know this, we survey even our students at Liberty, and we get this just plethora of information twice a year, fall and spring. Now, I just want to encourage our parents and say thank you so much for taking the time, 5 to 10 minutes, and filling this information out. A lot of times, we know the exact same issues that our parents are bringing up, but I can just say from the seat I sit in that it is so comforting when parents are going in the survey, they're leaving some feedback in there, and hey, here's something to maybe think about, here's a potential solution, and then we start having internal conversations about how we can actually plan to address those things. And the fact that we can get this kind of information from our parents and then turn around and within sometimes a week, a month, a year, or just put it on the radar for long term is such a blessing to our community. So we want to say thank you for doing so. Absolutely.
Very well said. And I think that the willingness to do these types of things is just another example of what partnership really looks like.
That's right.
Because without it, we don't truly always know what's going on. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, give us your final word for today's show, Dr. McCullough.
Well, I think as we head into the holiday season and coming off Thanksgiving and just looking at the year overall, the surveys and all the things that we're talking through, I think that there's a lot of great things happening on our campus, and I hear that a lot, Jared. I hear it from families. I hear it from students. We've got a lot of exciting things happening with construction that are going to ultimately lead to greater opportunity for our students, and that's what it's really all about. And so we have a lot of great things to be thankful for, to look forward to. We have to keep pushing and finish out the year strong. But I'm really pleased with the way this year has gone, despite a few hiccups with traffic and other things. But great, great year. I'm really proud of our community. Really proud of our new families and our faculty and staff.
I want to thank President Dr. McCullough for being the co-host on today's podcast, along with Mr. Josh and Mr. Hayburn for their behind-the-scenes support of the show. If you have any questions or comments for the show, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@mylcs.com. And again, be sure to subscribe to the Warrior Way podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcast services. Until next time, go Warriors.